Hey friends, I'm Wanda. I'm 28 years old, and I love relaxing with Minecraft and reading interesting Reddit stories. So grab a comfy spot, settle in, and let's enjoy today's stories together. Story 1. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our two kids were about 4 and 6, still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself. But since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but she was never a good liar. So I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some shit was going on. Then one day, I sat down at the computer, and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails, and saw a few email exchanges between her and her college BFF, where they discussed how my wife was regularly fucking one of her ex-boyfriends from high school. No mention of details about him other than my wife also talking shit about his wife, making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop, and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a PI. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times, dates, locations, all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch. Then they'd go to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which she'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout absolutely fucked mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report. And one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day, I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work. I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice, and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired. And since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly. Lots of fighting in and evidently out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state, and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids. And now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kid's mom and is important to them, nothing beyond that. And now that we've wrapped up our first tale, let's get ready for story number 2. Story 2. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 per week. The house was very run down, with a disgusting kitchen and stinking drains. But it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who was extremely wealthy and very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they had saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she had helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her. And so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away before anything was put in writing. Enter the new owners, the lady's 4 children, each extremely wealthy in their own right. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would still go through, but they would have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They started by stripping wallpaper, painting, and making plans. Finally, probate was settled, and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80,000 without telling my friends. To make things even worse, the house would be put on the open market. In 7 days, there would be an open house, and with the market the way it was, it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get. To make matters worse, property prices had soared recently, and rents had gone up a lot, whilst theirs had been frozen. Not only were my friends going to struggle to get the money, if the place was sold to someone else, and they were asked for a higher rent or were evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find an affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. They didn't need the money. It was pure greed, and it was obvious that they'd always planned to do this. So while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. The undesirable house, uncluttered. We moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture and borrowed ornaments, and hung a load of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt much smaller. Smell. My friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove, and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors, because it smells like all the neighborhood cats had been marking their territory. We also poured 24 rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. Neighborhood. We obtained a moldy old couch and dumped it in the front yard of the neighbor across the road, with permission, of course, and we started calling friends for help. Anybody with a loud and crappy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour, and we called out mates from the rugby club, full contact football, without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club are very large men. The next door neighbor set up a barbecue in their front yard, and we offered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles, wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Quite a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length of time was brave enough to start up a conversation with someone leaving the party. He asked if they were often there and was told every couple of weeks or so. They have an after-party morning, and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The partygoer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are always getting blocked by tree roots and stinking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer, so my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they'd planned, but not as much as the greedy bastards wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day, so when the brave buyer put in an offer of $30,000 more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it. Strict anti-gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owners' faces when they found out. Story 3. My family doesn't age like other people. My grandmother was 98 when she passed, but she looked 65, maybe younger. My great-uncle is 102 and still chops his own firewood. We've always credited it to good genes and our one sacred tradition, the renewal stew, served at every major family gathering. It was a rich, dark, savory stew that made you feel warm from the inside out, full of life. When Grandma Rose died, I was the one who inherited the old family farmhouse. Tucked away in her study, I finally found it. The original, handwritten recipe book, bound in cracked leather. I felt a thrill, like I was finally being let in on the secret. I opened it to the page for the renewal stew. It was mostly blank. There were no ingredients listed for the stew itself, only 2 cryptic notes in my great-great-grandmother's spidery script. For the broth, see the cellar instructions. For the seasoning, see the attic instructions. The cellar was damp and smelled of earth. Behind a stack of old canning jars, I found a loose stone in the wall. Pulling it free revealed a dark, hidden chamber. Inside, arranged in neat rows, were a dozen large, unglazed clay pots filled with a dark, peaty soil. A thick, pale, gnarled root snaked out of the soil in each pot, looking disturbingly like a human hand. A dusty journal sat on a small table. The entries, dating back to the 1800s, described the process. When a member of our family dies, they aren't buried or cremated. They are planted. Their bodies are prepared with a special mixture of herbs and laid to rest in these pots. Over the years, the soil and the body produce a life root. This root is harvested, boiled for 3 days, and becomes the broth for the renewal stew. I felt a wave of nausea. We weren't just eating stew. We were consuming the concentrated essence of our dead ancestors. Shaking, I went to the attic. In a locked trunk, I found a collection of small, ornate silver boxes, each engraved with the name of a living family member. I found my own, my name freshly engraved. Inside each box was a small, sharp, obsidian knife. Another journal explained the final step. The seasoning. It wasn't a spice. At each gathering, every family member present must make a living contribution to the stew. A few drops of blood, a sliver of fingernail, a tear cried directly into the pot. This offering of the living is what awakens the ancestral broth. I slammed the book shut, my hands trembling. It was a grotesque, cannibalistic ritual. I vowed I would never participate. The next major gathering was for the autumn equinox. I made an excuse not to go, claiming I had the flu. I felt a sense of righteous defiance. A week later, my mother called, her voice thin and weak. "Your Aunt Carol isn't doing well," she said. "She's had a sudden decline." I drove to my aunt's house. The woman who opened the door was a stranger. She looked 80 years old, her skin thin and translucent like parchment, her hair patchy and white. But it was Aunt Carol. She was only 58. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a desperate, hungry light. "You didn't come," she rasped, her hand gripping my arm with surprising strength. Her fingernails were cracked and yellow. The stew, it wasn't strong enough. It's always weaker when someone is missing. I finally understood. We don't have good genes. We have a curse, a rapid, horrifying decay that is constantly trying to claim us. The stew isn't a fountain of youth. It's the only thing that holds the rot at bay. We aren't living long lives. We are desperately, grotesquely staving off an accelerated death. The winter solstice is next month. My mother called again yesterday. She told me my great uncle's hands are so stiff he can no longer hold an axe. She told me she found a new gray hair, and when she plucked it, a small patch of skin came with it. Then she asked if I would be coming home for the solstice. Her voice was casual, but the question hung in the air, heavy and raw. They need me. They need my contribution. I'm looking at the small silver box with my name on it. The little black knife sits inside, cold and sharp. I have a choice. I can go participate in this stomach-churning ritual and feed the curse to keep my family looking young and vibrant while I know the horrifying truth, or I can stay here, clean and pure, and watch them all fall apart, knowing that the same rot is flowing through my own veins, waiting for its turn. Story 4. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need to know if anyone has ever experienced anything like this. I live in a small farmhouse that I inherited from my grandmother 6 weeks ago when she passed away. It sits on a lot of a couple acres of land. When she passed away, I had just graduated from college. So instead of selling it, I decided I'd live in it and maintain it while I looked for a job in the area. The nearest town is around 30 minutes away from me, but I usually don't mind the seclusion. In fact, my closest neighbor is around 10 minutes away as the crow flies. The first day that I got here, I was over the moon about being the sole owner of my childhood home. The long dirt road to get you to the house was lined with dense forest. And once I finally reached the house, I realized that my grandmother had really let this place go. There were vines practically holding the shutters closed like the house was holding in a secret. I knew I was going to have a lot of work to do, but since I had a bit of savings, I could focus on getting the house back in order. When I unlocked the front door and went inside, I was met with an overpowering smell of lavender. It seemed that even though my grandmother let the outside of the house go, the inside was pristine. I set my luggage down and went into her bedroom. I spent the next week cleaning up the outside of the house. I found all kinds of things in the overgrown grass, like an old farmer's hat, gardening scissors, and coloring books that had been scribbled in. I hadn't ever seen any of these items before, but chalked it up to belonging to my cousins when they were kids. The first week of living, there nothing else really went on. It's this week, the second week, that strange things started happening. After a long day of finishing the yard work, I came inside and kicked my boots off. I made sure to lock the front door and deadbolt it, since living alone in the middle of the woods as a woman can get kind of scary. I made my way to the bathroom when I heard footsteps behind me. I whipped my head around, but I didn't see anything. I thought it was just the old house settling, so I continued to the bathroom and got into the shower. Now, I don't know if it's my mind playing tricks on me, but every time I dunked my head under the shower head, I thought I heard giggling right behind me. Once again, nothing there. I got out of the shower, dried myself off, and slipped into my pajamas. That's when I noticed something written in the steam on the mirror. Hello. I was genuinely freaked out at this point, but knew that my younger family members had been here right after grandmother died. So I wrote it off that the writing was maybe lingering. That night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a loud knock at my door. I checked the time on my phone, 11:43 p.m. Like I said, my nearest neighbor is 10 minutes away, so I had no clue what someone was doing here late at night before my dad passed away. He instilled in me that the world is very dangerous. So the minute I turned 21, he paid for me to get a concealed carry license. I grabbed my pistol and tucked it into my waistband as I walked toward the front door. I could have just ignored it, but I didn't know if maybe it was the police or someone in trouble. I opened the door a bit and saw a rather small man. I'm 52, and he couldn't have been much taller than me, in a button-up polo with black slacks, and those shiny shoes that the pastor always wore. Hello, he spoke up. I'm Mr. Pfister. I work for the night census. He had the biggest smile on his face, almost like he had won the lottery. The night census, I said suspiciously. I've never heard of that. Well, yes. We only knock on select doors. Think of it as a sort of government initiative for after-dark population tracking. He ran his fingers through his gelled back, almost slimy black hair. Who all is here? Has anyone been here since the last count? Mr. Pfister tried peeking around my shoulder, but I quickly shut him down. I'm sorry, sir. What do you mean since the last count? We come by a couple times a night to get the exact number of people living in the household. When I came by earlier, I spoke to your gardener, and he let me know that he lived here as well as his son. He pulled a clipboard out from behind his back, but he didn't inform me that anyone else lived here. I'll just write it down really quick. I watched as he wrote young female in her late 20s, presumably alone, under where he had already written gardener and his young son. There was obviously no one else here, so I was extremely startled. I don't have a gardener. I think you must have the wrong house. It's just me here. I didn't notice my slip-up until I said it. I mean, my husband should be back any minute now. He had to run into town to get something. I tried to cover it up by lying, but he saw right through it. His smile grew wider, and he turned his head to the ground, still staring at me through his eyebrows. We know you're here alone, Natalie. He chuckled, but not in a friendly way. It sounded like a dry rattling coming from his throat. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I could still hear his laughter outside, which turned into a sea of screaming. I ran to the bedroom to call someone and had, of course, no signal. I couldn't get to my car without him seeing me, so I had no idea what to do. I barricaded myself in my room, but I accidentally drifted off to sleep. I woke up again to a knock at the door. I looked at my phone, 3:36 a.m. I don't know if this Mr. Pfister guy is some kind of prankster or lunatic. I wasn't going to let him scare me. I opened up the door and didn't let him get a word in. Stop fucking harassing me. I spat. I have a gun. I don't know what you're trying to do, but you're trespassing. Go the fuck away. His smile softened into a look of confusion. I'm sorry for disturbing you, ma'am, but I don't believe we've met. His lips curled into a smile again, and he held out his hand for me to shake. I'm Mr. Pfister. From the night census, we are. I cut him off. Yeah, I know who you are. You were just here. Oh no, you must be mistaken. Me and my twin brother take turns checking houses. I was obviously confused at this point, so he pulled out his clipboard. So, you must be Natalie. I've got that you live in the bedroom towards the back of the house. Then the other occupants are the gardener, Silas, and his son, Thomas. I have here that they live in the bedroom that branches off of the family room. No, I don't know who Silas or Thomas are, but they definitely don't live here. What? No, I see them right back there on the couch. He stood on his tiptoes and waved to something behind me. As I turned around to see what he was waving at, Mr. Pfister ran past me while giggling. I had no clue who this guy was or why he wanted to be in my home, but I saw this as an opportunity to get out of there. I grabbed my keys from the bowl next to the door and ran to my car, leaving the front door wide open. I peeled out of there as quickly as possible to a small motel in town. That's where I am now. Do any of you know what's going on? Has anyone experienced anything like this? Any help would be appreciated. Please help me. And that's the end of today's stories. I hope you enjoyed it and that you're feeling relaxed. Take your time, get comfy, and I'll see you in the next video.